Hello everyone and welcome to the Sociopedia channel. Today we're jumping right into a really big topic from Class 11 Sociology, social structure, stratification, and social processes. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but trust me, this isn't just a chapter in a textbook. It's basically the key to understanding the invisible forces that shape, well, pretty much everything in our lives. So, let's get right into it. So, let's kick things off with a huge question. Seriously, take a moment and think about your own life. How much of it is really because of your choices, and how much of it has been kind of decided for you by the society you were born into? This is the core idea that the sociologist C. Wright Mills called the sociological imagination, and it's the big puzzle we're going to try and piece together today. To even begin to answer a question that big, we first need to understand how society is built. Think of it like a blueprint for a building, and that blueprint has two main parts: social structure and social stratification. These are like the invisible rules, the walls, and the different floors of the game we all call life, a game we all have to play.
Okay, so what in the world is social structure? It sounds complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple and really powerful idea. It just means that society isn't a bunch of random chaos. Nope. There are patterns, there are predictable ways we all behave and interact with each other. Even when life feels totally unpredictable, it's actually operating within an organized system. And that system, that organization, is its social structure.
Now, here's a brilliant way to picture this from the famous sociologist Emil Durkheim. Imagine you're standing in a room. The room itself, its walls, its doors, where the windows are, limits or constrains what you can do, right? You can walk through a door, but you can't just walk through a solid brick wall. In exactly the same way, our social structure puts limits on our actions and our choices.
And this structure isn't just some abstract theory floating around in a book. It is physically built into the world all around us. You can see it in the layout of a modern city just as much as you can see it in the way a traditional village is designed. Our physical world is a mirror of our social world, and it shapes how we live every single day.
Okay, now for this second part of that social blueprint, social stratification. This one is huge. It refers to the structured inequalities and, let's be honest, the often unfair inequalities that exist between different groups of people. It's the system that basically ranks people into layers, like a cake, based on their access to things like money, respect, or power.
So how does this inequality actually show up in our lives? Well, it usually takes three main forms. First, they're your life chances. This is the big one. It's your access to essentials like good health care, money, and just basic safety. Second, you have social status. Think of this as how much prestige or respect people give you. And third, political influence, which is your group's power to make the rules that everybody else has to follow. And the key thing to remember is that these advantages are never spread out equally.
Okay, so we've looked at the blueprint of society, the structure, but a blueprint is just a drawing, right? It's static. How do people actually act and interact inside this building? Well, that brings us to social processes, and we're going to look at the three big ones: cooperation, competition, and conflict.
Let's start with cooperation. I mean, it's something we do all the time, from our families to our jobs. But why do we do it? Is it just because we're naturally helpful people, or are there some deeper social forces making us work together? Well, sociology has some really fascinating and very different answers. And you can see two totally different takes on this right here. On one hand, you have Emil Durkheim. He argued that cooperation happens because of social solidarity. It's like a moral glue that holds us together because we want to be held together. But then you have Karl Marx, who had a much darker view. He said that in a society divided by class, a lot of what we call cooperation is actually forced, with a ton of conflict bubbling just under the surface. To really get what Marx is talking about, you have to understand his idea of alienation. This is the feeling of powerlessness that workers get when they lose control over their own work. I mean, just imagine someone on a factory assembly line doing the same time task over and over and over again. They feel completely disconnected or alienated from the thing they're making. For them, cooperation isn't some happy choice. It's what they have to do to survive. All right, let's move on to the next process: competition. We're told all the time that being competitive is just human nature, right? But is that really true? Sociology kind of challenges that idea. It suggests that our modern obsession with competition isn't natural at all. It's something society has taught us to value. In our world today, especially in capitalist societies,
competition is basically king. We're told it's what makes us innovate and it makes sure the best people win. But this whole idea has one massive blind spot. It assumes that everyone is starting the race from the exact same starting line. But as we just talked about with social stratification, we know that's just not true, is it?
And when that competition is fundamentally unfair, when the game is rigged from the start, it often boils over into our third process, conflict. But here's the twist. Conflict doesn't always look like a big open fight. Sometimes the most intense conflicts are the ones you can't even see.
And this is such a critical insight. What looks like peaceful cooperation on the surface can actually just be a mask for some really deep conflict. When one group in society has all the power, the weaker group might have to cooperate just because the risk of fighting back is way too high. This quote right here from a study is a perfect and honestly a heartbreaking example. It found that many women choose not to claim the property that is rightfully theirs from their family. And why? Because they're scared it would ruin their relationship with their brothers. This is a classic case of enforced cooperation that's hiding a very real but silent conflict over resources.
So what this demonstrates so clearly is that groups with less power, in this case, women in a patriarchal family structure, often choose to cooperate on the surface. It's not because they're happy with the situation. It's a smart, calculated strategy to avoid the massive personal cost of an open fight.
So, after all of that, after looking at the social structure, the layers of inequality, and this whole complex dance of cooperation, competition, and conflict, let's circle all the way back to where we started. With all these powerful, invisible forces pushing and pulling on us, how free are we, really?
You know, maybe the best and most honest answer comes from this very famous quote from Karl Marx. He said, "Human beings make history, but not as they wish to or in conditions of their choice." What he means is, yes, we absolutely have the power to make choices. Our choices matter, but those choices are always limited by the structures and the situations we're born into. And that brings us to the biggest takeaway of the day. Without a doubt, society shapes who we are. But, and this is a big but, it's not a one-way street. Our actions, our everyday choices to cooperate, to compete, or to challenge things through conflict, those are the very things that keep society going. And more importantly, they are the things that have the power to change it over time.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Now, if you'd like more detailed notes on everything we've covered today, you can find them on our Telegram channel. The link for that is right there in the description for you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you for the next one.